Hi, good afternoon, good evening, good morning. Whatever time you may be watching this, welcome again to another episode of Sis. It's just not God's best for you. So actualize and shine podcast show with me, your host, Quetta Wilkes. And thanks again for joining. Let me tell you guys are in for a treat because guess what? It's not just me today. I have a special guest. This is my homegirl, my new life coach bestie. Britney Stephenson. Did I say your last name right?
You sure did.
Okay. Just had to make sure because with my name, people mess it up. So I'm like, I don't like messing up other people's names. I just want to make sure I got that right. So again, ladies and gentlemen, this is Britney Stephenson, and I decided to have her as a guest as we talk about upholding our standards and creating boundaries. So just want to tell you guys a little bit more about Britney. So she is, like I mentioned, a fellow life coach on my mentor.life, specializing in faith-based healing through life and situationships. With her coaching, Brittany helps her clients transform confusion and pain into clarity and purpose. And as a master certified life coach, Brittany helps real people deal with real problems to get and keep life on track. And this is why I decided to have Brittany as a guest on my show. So welcome again, Brittany. Thanks for coming, for talking to us today as we talk about boundaries and all that good stuff. So I'm just going to jump right in. During the intro, I talked about situationships, and that's kind of what you help women and women and men, but probably particularly women deal with. So I wanted to know, how would you define a situationship? Because it's so many varying kind of definitions and people define it one way. So I was wondering, for you, how do you define a situationship?
That is a great question. First, let me just say thank you for having me. It is always a pleasure for life coaches to connect. So I'm really happy to be here and honored to be here. Situationships. I think that we're in a place for sure, definitely in our generation, where we've really lost sight of what a healthy relationship is. And I think that there are a lot of factors that contribute to that. But overall, I think a situationship is where two people have emotions involved, but no sense of what they're doing, what it is, why their emotions are entangled. And I think it really sets up both people for just a road of confusion and discomfort and potential pain, because anytime feelings are involved and you don't know like what capacity that they're in your life, it's going to be a setup for a hot mess. So what's coming up for me is sex. Like, I think that sex is one of the biggest reasons why people end up in situationships, because we're really, really quick today to jump to that part of intimacy without learning who a person fully is, without making sure that we're on the same page in terms of like what the other person wants and making sure that our desires really align. And so, I think what is supposed to be a very sacred act puts people in a position to be confused with feelings and just all the feels that don't really have a safe home quite yet. So, situationships are just filled with confusion and pain.
There we go. And I love that answer. I mean, I try to say, I don't know, I just made this up. Like, I feel like we need to start being psychologists and not gynecologists when dating. You know what I mean? Like, starting to get to know someone in their mind, how they think, how they process before, you intertwine, like, those things, So I totally get it. And I feel like that's how come we do get into situationships. So I'm glad that you mentioned that. And that's like, your basis of what a situationship is. And then like I mentioned, like on your bio, on my mentor.life, you said that we sometimes learn how to implement boundaries, standards after some tough lessons in dating and in situationships. So for you, what's one tough lesson, or you can give us a few, but what's one tough lesson you actually had to learn and that you can share with others?
Yeah, I do have lots, but I think that overall, the way that a lack of boundaries showed up in my personal life was just not understanding that my personal space is sacred. So me not understanding boundaries and not setting standards, I sort of just like looked for the good in people, no matter how problematic they were. And I got myself into a lot of situations where I let people that didn't have the best intentions or really any intentions with me in way too quickly, sort of assuming or anticipating something that just was never going to unfold because we were actually never on the same page. For me, I think one of the biggest struggles was really how to protect my personal, like physical space. So since I was 18, I have pretty much lived on my own, and I really do value like my home. Like I like my home a certain way. I like, my own space. I'm quite independent. And I think that positioned me to like create safe spaces for men that could only show up in my life in the form of a threat. For no other reason than that's just like where they're at in their own healing journey. But me being like someone who valued that for myself and cared for people who couldn't necessarily return that care for me, I found myself opening my door to people that, I just cared about. And over time, I started to realize like not all energy should have access to my personal space. Like we're not even talking about sex. We're not talking about anything intimate. Just like you don't belong in my space. And I think that sets us like learning how to just like set boundaries around pace and who belongs in my space and when they're welcome there. It's like a big eye opener for me because I let people get way too comfortable way too soon.
And I get it, because in a way, like when you were talking, it reminded me of like a quote or something that I heard where we kind of see the world as we see ourselves. So, you didn't think anyone didn't have like wrong intentions towards you because you don't have any wrong intentions towards them. You know what I mean? So I kind of get it. You know what I mean? Like, when you just look at, I heard them say, like, if you are kind of skeptical of people, like if you think everybody is lying or is a liar, then it's probably some areas in your life where you do it. So like sometimes we mirror, you know what I mean? I think they call it like projection or something, but it just lets me know like, oh, she has a good heart, and that's how come she thinks everyone else does. You know what I mean? But like you said, putting in boundaries and realizing like, wait a minute, just because I have a good heart don't mean I have to give it to everybody. Okay, you have to earn this, or you have to qualify, or you have to be vetted. Yeah, that's what I want to say.
All of that. And I think that's why I love what I do as a coach, like helping women recognize that that's a gift. Like that's not something to be ashamed of. Having a kind heart, like having the ability to hold space for somebody is not something that we want to shy away from. It just has to be put into the right hands. And it's something that we have to protect and actually use as a gift. So learning how to actually implement boundaries and standards is a monumental game changer for anybody like dating or, just not even exclusively to dating. Like boundaries and standards are something that we all need in every area of our lives, I believe.
Very true, because I could just imagine how that can transfer into our workplace. Like, you want to help out, you want to go above and beyond, but then some people can take advantage of that too. You know what I mean? Like we'll ask Brittany because we know that she'll do it. She's not going to say no, so people will take advantage of that. Even like you said, not even just like intimate relationships, but also like throughout life. So boundaries matter. Hashtag boundaries matter. That's what I always say. So I'm glad that you talked about why you love doing what you do as a coach. So that was going to be my next question. So what kind of brought you to this space, wanting to be a life coach? Because I understand like we go through lessons and we learn and we grow, but sometimes, that's it. We keep it to ourselves and keep it moving. Not often we look back and try to help other people. So I was just curious about your testimony, your story. What kind of brought you to this place to want to be a life coach and help others?
Yeah. So I come from a family with a lot of love. Like there's a lot of love in my household, but I was also exposed to a lot of toxicity and emotional chaos from a young age. And I am the youngest of my immediate family, and I've also always just been like a natural observer. Like I'm a people watcher. And I've really always been curious about just how people move, like why we do the things that we do, why we act the way that we act, how we go about making decisions, and what all of that leads to, like how that, turns into the lives that we live. So I just remember, like, from a really, really young age, looking at people and just being like interested in all of that. And I grew up really loving life, somebody who was just like interested in doing it all, doing all the things, seeing all the things, being everything. And that put me in a lot of spaces that I didn't necessarily belong in. But over time, I started to realize, like, this is my testimony. Like, the types of situations and just like my path, and some really, really deep talks with God has helped me realize, like, okay, like, you're living this way for a certain reason, and you can either like let it get the best of you, or you can turn it into something that you can package and help other people transform as well. So really just a natural desire to understand people and life and how we move, and then also the desire to help other women, other people navigate life in a way where it's not happening to us, but we're showing up proactively and from a place of action, not reaction.
I like that. How you just decide to package everything together and use it for good. And it made me think when you say you were like a natural observer of like me growing up. I remember I wanted to go to school and be like a sociologist because I found out that they study people and groups and how like people interact. So it's just like so funny that we all kind of have that in common. Like we can like people watch and stuff like that. And I also feel like I don't know if like this is the case for you. As life coaches, we're constantly life coaching ourselves. You know what I mean? Like I feel like at the end of the day, like I'm my greatest client because I'm like working on myself, improving on myself. Like, okay, Sinquetta, why did you feel a certain type of way? Let's unpack that. Let's think about that. So I feel like, as life coaches, we like what makes us good is that, we're our own kind of coach. You know what I mean? Like I be hard on them, but it's like I'm even harder on myself. So
Right. I say that my coaching practice is my accountability partner. And I don't believe in selling things that I wouldn't buy myself. So I'm an advocate of coaches, having coaches. And I think, yeah, that's like, if we don't believe in our own product, like, why would people buy from us? So yeah, and we are our first clients.
There we go. Yes. So, through your platform, you also talk to your audience about knowing their value. I just feel like I love that message because I feel like it's severely lacking. But what are some ways or some steps that individuals can take in gaining clarity on how to define their value or, start to value themselves?
Yeah. I think the only way to really define something's value is to even know what the thing is, right? And so, like, if you didn't know what an iPhone was and I told you to value it, you wouldn't be able to you wouldn't know its worth because you don't know what the thing is. So I think in working with my clients, much of what we do is get really, really clear on one, who we are and whose we are. So without the latter, the first doesn't make sense. So if we don't know whose we are, we have no idea, no way of really forming a working knowledge of who we are. So as a faith-based life coach, I make sure that my clients, and they come in as believers. I work with believers, at least people who have an open enough heart to learn about Jesus, because that's who our identity is rooted in. And once we understand that and work from that place, that's when we can talk about value. So much of that process is shedding what the world wants us to believe we are. Much of who we are, much of what we carry is not even our stuff. Our parents have told us who we should be. Our teachers tell us what we're worth. Our employers literally put a price tag on our heads. And obviously, like social media, like we get so many ideas about who we should be and what we should have, what we should be doing from social media, scrolling through other people's realities all day. And so much of what we do, much of what I do as a coach is help clients shed all of that. Like, let's just strip you down to your soul level and talk about who you are without what the world feeds you. Like, let go of what the world suggests and let's talk about what God said about who you are. And that's much more practical than it sounds, but from another practical perspective, a big piece of that is really getting clear on our personal values. So we're also living in a time where people find their value in their valuables. And you're not a purse, you're not a house, you're not a car. So if you don't know who you are in terms of the things that you can't touch, like who you are the things that I can't touch and the things that I can't see. And so again, much of what we do is just shed what the world has fed us and get really, really clear on the invisible parts of ourselves that are intangible. They're eternal. So, yeah.
Brittany, you said a mouthful, and I agree with you on every level. Like you said, it starts with knowing who you are and whose you are. That is so true. Like, I feel like that's the transformation I had to go through because I was curious to know who Cinquetta was without the Beyonce influences, the Rihanna influence, the hot girl summer, like all the things that are bombarded to us, like you said, scrolling on social media. Like, but who are you, Cinquetta? You know what I mean? Like, and I feel like the real Cinquetta, once I was able to see myself as God saw me, she's fearless, she's bold, she's confident. Versus like when I'm out and trying to compare myself to fit into the world standards, just like all that gets stripped away. So it's like, okay, which side am I going to go by? So I'm so glad you touched on that, finding our value by knowing who we are and whose we are. That was really good. So we're going to switch gears a little bit and start talking like dating and relationships. So I also, like I said, when I was scrolling on your Instagram page, I liked how you shared tips on ways that we can identify narcissists. And I think it's because you broke down that narcissist Chris from Married at First Sight. Like, oh my gosh, he's so triggering. So I'm like glad that you put it all in perspective for us. So what are like some ways, or what's the number one way like we can sometimes attract narcissists to us? Because nobody wants a narcissist, but sometimes like you could be surrounded by them or you keep attracting them. So like what could it be about us that attracts a narcissist to us when dating?
Light. It's light. It's light and good energy. So first, narcissism as a disorder is characterized by deep insecurity, fear of abandonment, emotional instability, and an overinflated ego, and also a disturbing lack of empathy. Like that's narcissism in a nutshell: insecurity, instability, ego, and lack of emotions, lack of empathy, the ability to feel. So naturally, they attract people who can feel in abundance. So that would be empaths. And an empath is really just somebody who has like more care, concern, and regard for the next than your average would. They're people who are quick to forgive. They're people who are understanding. They're people who want to see the best in even the most difficult types of people. And really, a narcissist isn't welcomed in anyone else's life but an empath. It's like that yin yang energy where the darkness needs light, and then the light is bright enough to like, I have enough light for myself and for you. So yeah, I know you're damaged. I know like you're working through a lot. I know like you're not quite there emotionally, but I care for you, and I'm strong enough on my own, so I'm gonna create this space where you're safe here with me. And that's really all a narcissist wants and needs. They want an enabler who creates a safe space for them to be as toxic as they want to be. And we saw that unfold with Chris and Paige. I admire Paige for so many different reasons, and that's not an experience that I would wish on anyone. But what I am grateful for is that America got to see what malignant narcissism looks like in the worst way through Chris. Chris's personality type is a dangerous type, and we only saw a glimpse of it on TV. Of course, we don't know what went on behind the scenes. Like much happened that we just have no idea about, but we saw enough to know that that's not. I literally wouldn't wish narcissism or a narcissistic relationship on my worst enemy. It's a very dangerous thing emotionally and physically sometimes. So I think to answer your question, like what attracts narcissists is a lack of boundaries. They want to move really quick, sexually, emotionally. They want to get you hooked and entangled as quickly as possible. And so these are really here's why knowing your value is so important, because if you don't know what you're working with, if you don't know what you're protecting, if you don't know what your boundaries are even set up for, it really sets you up to let any and every and anybody in your life. And narcissists are usually people that have a lot to offer on the surface. They're usually very attractive people. They're usually highly successful. They're usually charismatic and like, you know, the person who can like work a room. So they have a lot working for them in terms of like personality and at least superficially. So they attract people who, for a while, I was attracted to these types of people because like I'm very like, I could be in the corner and be okay. Like I like nice things, but like I don't care to have like the fastest, fanciest, like nicest car. And so I was interested and intrigued by men who had that because it just wasn't like something that naturally I carried on my own. Like I almost had too little of an ego. And they have an abundance of an ego. They have too much of an ego, and they have so much of an ego that they lack a soul. And that's what makes it a very dangerous, dark thing. And again, that's why they attract people who have enough light to shine on them. And a narcissist's goal is, whether we want to say it's conscious or subconscious, their goal is to drain people's light as quickly as possible. Like they're too dark to exist on their own, and they also don't want anyone else to shine either. They know that they're not alone if they could steal somebody else's light as well. And then they're not so bad, right? If you're just as dark as I am, I'm not so bad. So that's sort of what's going on in their minds. And with Paige and Chris, we saw Paige like go through an incredible amount of manipulation really, really quickly at what should have been one of the most exciting, love-filled chapters of her life. And she still exercised a level of grace and mercy and poise that most of us could not. Ephesians 5:13 says, light shines out, or light will always expose the true character. Light exposes the true character of everything. And that's exactly what happened there. Like Paige's light exposed Chris for exactly who he was. Paige's light exposed all of Chris's literal demons. While we got to see a beautiful woman exercise grace and mercy.
Yes, she did. And I love how you put that together. I never really thought about narcissism in that way. Like, you know what I mean? I just did not like Chris. I'm like, oh, he's annoying. But hearing like their experience is just like, okay, we should kind of have compassion for these people, because like you said, they could be in darkness. But okay, so with that, I may ask it, but now that you brought it up, so if they're attracted to our light, and I think you may have answered it too, but if they're attracted to our light, how do we not shine in our light so they won't come? Like, how do we scale it back? Like, do we dim it?
We're not scaling back our light. That's not what we're doing.
Okay.
You're going to shine as bright as possible. I'm going to shine as bright as possible. And everybody else who's been given this gift to just naturally like look at life half full, and carry that ability to hold space for people, show up with compassion and forgiveness, and literally be a source of light. I believe those types are here to do God's work. Anything outside of that is darkness and operating from the enemy's team. And so again, it's just this battle with darkness and light. But to answer your question, what I work with survivors of narcissistic relationships with is recognizing that the narcissist and the narcissistic relationship didn't happen to you. You survived narcissism because it happened for you. So again, light exposes the true character of everything. So what we saw in Paige, and the opportunity there for Paige, is to take all of those qualities in her that Chris abused and recognize them as gifts. Like, we're going to turn those into gifts that you're going to use for you. But the opportunity there is to make sure that you're placing them in the right hands, and that we're not working from a place of like need or attachment or codependence. Not that that was Paige's situation. Of course, she was married, but we're talking about dating and attracting narcissistic personalities. A lot of the times it's because we don't understand our own value outside of the context of someone else. So if we're not existing within the context of somebody else, and we don't understand that we're worth it. And then again, a narcissist is so charming and has so much to offer on the surface superficially, that they really do make people feel so special, that the person with the light doesn't want to lose them. Like, and this is how manipulation works. Like, you really do get engulfed and entangled emotionally, and you forget, like, okay, like, I have something to offer and it's being taken advantage of here. So it's not about dimming your light. That is never the goal. It's about shining where your light is well received and healthy. I describe it, and I've heard narcissism described as pouring into a bucket with holes in it. That's what it feels like. And that's why usually when you interact with a narcissistic personality for even a little bit of time, like, you'll walk away feeling drained because they have to absorb your light. Like, they're so dark on their own that whatever goodness you bring to the table, they need it. It's like a literal drug. That's why we call it narcissistic supply, because just like if you're addicted to alcohol, you're not well. You don't function without a bottle. And narcissists in the same way become dependent on other people's energy as their drug, their supply. And this is why the survivors of narcissistic relationships unfortunately walk away really confused about who they are, like literally where they went, because they lost themselves somewhere in a relationship where they, like, who they were was literally being sucked out of them day by day. So yeah, I don't know if I answered your question.
No, you did. And it also enlightened me, like, when you just said that, like, oh, I was in a narcissistic relationship, because I remember saying point blank, like, I'd rather lose you than lose myself, because I really felt like I was losing myself. But at the time, I didn't know that, it was a narcissistic relationship, or that, I was a supply. But it's just really real. That really will happen to you, and it's just crazy how. And like you said, you do kind of walk out like, okay, who am I? I had to rebuild myself up again. Like, let's talk about all this stuff on my wall, like affirmations, like okay, Quetta. Like, even though that situation kind of came to drain you, like, you got to build yourself back up and remember whose you are and who you are. That makes all the difference.
And it happens for you. Exactly. So, like, it's a painful thing to go through. Again, I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. You're talking to someone too who has gone through and survived narcissistic relationships with an S. So yeah, like, I feel that. And it is a period of rebuilding yourself piece by piece and recognizing, like, that person, everything that they had going on, it had nothing to do with me. Like, that's their own weight, their own baggage, their own emotional trauma that they have to sort out for their own. And again, like, this is why they attract people who are heart-centered people, because we see them and we could, like, sort of like cut through all of that nonsense and be like, I see the person in you. I see the good person that you want to be. And we want to love them in that place. But when you're dealing with somebody who has no intentions, they don't even think anything is wrong. Like, their ego is so inflated that you and I are the problems, not them. And there's no progress to be made with someone who doesn't even think that there's a problem. So again, we're not pouring into buckets with holes in them. We're going to shine our light where it's well received and reciprocated. And that's the whole point. Like, we don't really learn how to use our light and our hearts as gifts sometimes until there's something tragic that teaches us, like, okay, I can't do that again. Like, I can't operate in that space again.
Right. And like you said in the beginning, like, what we have is precious, like being kind and caring. That is a good thing. So, kind of spend it or use it wisely on the people that's like receptive to that. So I got you. So, okay, how can we as women or men that may be watching this, we kind of answered the question, become narcissist proof and guard our hearts from narcissism? And I really put the guard your heart part in there, because I know, like, in scripture, especially, you being a faith-based, coach, the Bible talks about guarding our hearts. So again, how can we guard our hearts from a narcissist?
Yes, so my necklace says Proverbs 4:23, which is, above all costs, guard your heart, for it is the source of all life.
Wow, guys, I did not plan that. I did not know. We did not plan that, but wow.
And I mentioned that to say, like, it's something that we have to be mindful about. It's really, really easy to forget. But even if we think about like our body physically, like our heart is like, it's the center of everything we do. It's what connects us to God. It's what connects us to everything above and right here where we are. And if we're not mindful of that, it could, people, relationships, life happens to us, and not for us. So again, boundaries and standards. I say that standards are for us. It's really just getting clear on what we want in terms of like expectations, characteristics, who we want to show up in our lives. And then boundaries are how we want people to show up in our lives. How do we want people to deal with us? And if we don't define that, people will deal with us in any which way that they want to. So the way to protect our hearts, is to have standards and set boundaries around that. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like it doesn't have to be a situation where like anyone's thinking that they're better than anyone. It's just, I know, again, who I am, whose I am, and what that means in terms of how I have to protect myself and just how I have to move. Again, a big piece of that too is like not being afraid to detach from people who just aren't healthy for us. I think sometimes we get in spaces where we don't want to walk away from people because it's so much easier to stay in a toxic space than it is to exist alone. And we should never sell ourselves short just to say that we have company, like just to say that there's someone next to you. And here's why I think having a real relationship with God is so important, because when you give God your heart, he has so much more for us than we could ever want for ourselves. And trust and believe, like, God is a loving parent. He's a loving father who does not want us heartbroken. He doesn't want us hurt or chasing people that can't reciprocate. So much of protecting our hearts, I think, is sometimes being willing to just like walk away, literally detach from what we know is just not good for us. Like, and that doesn't mean you have to be rude. We can still give all the love that we can, but from a distance. I can love you without needing to be like in your life fully. Like, yeah.
I agree. And I like that, the standards and boundaries, because when you think about it, I feel like we're like the boss and CEO of our lives. So when you go on the job, they have policies and procedures, and it doesn't matter how much they like you. If you violate, I'm sorry, bye. They don't care if you violated because like you were having a bad day. Does not matter. You know what I mean? Like your boundaries and standards are in place to keep you from like, I don't know, going too far or giving like second, third, and fourth chances. You know what I mean? It's like, even though I may like you or love you, like you violated, so you have to go. So I feel like if corporations and businesses can do that, so much more should we, like you said, because we have a heart that connects us to God. So we should like be that much more protective of it.
Yeah.
So I want to read the comment I got on IG. Hey, lights on improvement. She said, we were talking about boundaries. She said, or being afraid of starting all over again. That's also why we stay. Yes, that is very true. The fear of starting all over again. But I feel like in a way, starting over for me is like fun because I get to reinvent myself. And I just feel like life is more exciting with new opportunities, but I do understand it is kind of like scary to want to start all over again. But Brittany, did you want to like add on to that about starting all over again? If we are afraid to?
I think she's spot on. Like, much of us feel like if we've invested any amount of time in a person, that we're going to be spending the rest of our lives with them. And no, I encourage my clients and people in general to look at dating as such. Like, dating is just a trial period, if you will, a testing ground to really understand and vet an entire person to see, is this someone I want to spend my entire life with? And the more clear you get on that, you should be acting on that. So if the relationship is progressing in a healthy way, continue in that direction. But if every day is an uphill battle and every day is a struggle and every day is uncomfortable, at some point, the amount of time that you've invested won't matter. Like why would, if we've been struggling for a year, I don't want to put 50 more years into this painful situation if we're not married. Now, if you're married already, that's a whole different story. But if we're dating and we're still figuring each other out and learning each other, and we have no covenant, there is no legally binding contract, and we're not in a marriage, God does not even recognize dating. It's nowhere in the Bible. So like we're allowed to try people on for size. And that's again why we like, why there should be boundaries around sex. Like, we're not just out here like sharing that piece of ourselves because we don't know if this person is going to be in our lives. And I think we have to be willing to say, okay, like, we've put in the time, we've tried, we're just not compatible, and that's okay. Again, no disrespect needs to be exchanged there. But yeah, I think she's spot on. Like, sometimes it's not fun to start over. We want what's familiar. We want what we're used to. And especially if it's a soul tie. So again, like I can't get it off the point of sex. Like, a soul tie will keep you in a very uncomfortable space, in a space that's dangerous, that you were never supposed to be in. I've been in spaces that were with people that I should have never had 2 conversations with. But
should have never got past knowing each other's name.
Exactly. But now our souls are entangled, and it's like, okay, well, like I don't, in a very real way, like, people, it's hard to detach when our souls are enmeshed. So
and it's like, oh, I'm sorry, repeat that again.
I'm sorry, I'm just saying it's not something to play with.
Very true. And I was just gonna say, I feel like that's how come I understand why God says sex is for marriage, because I feel like it's a strength then, you know what I mean? Because all right, if your husband does something that annoys you, it's okay. We're in this together, you know, because we, you know, consummated the marriage. But then when you aren't in covenant, like you said, it can become like the kryptonite or like your weakness, even though you really need to leave. But because like you done, like, your soul tie is just that much harder. So it's like, okay, I get it. Like, Lord, forgive me. Like, now I see. Oh my gosh. So lights on empowerment. She said, exactly. It's the time that was invested. So it's the time that was invested that makes it hard to walk away. So I do understand that.
On that note, like, you made an excellent comparison to employers being willing to part ways with us. Investment is another great way to look at it. So if we're investing money, if you invested a ton of money into Bitcoin or any other investment, and then it's like, oh, this was not a wise investment, you're going to pull your money out. So at any point, we should also be pulling our hearts out of situations that we're not getting the type of return that is going to satisfy us long term, without any, like, I mean, that's easier said than done, obviously, but that's why we're here. That's why we're doing what we do.
That's good. I like that. It's easier said than done. But yeah, it's almost like what I try to coach my clients and say, like, okay, you can date, but also date your hobbies. That way you're not spending all your time investing in this one person. But if you're dating your hobbies, working out, hanging out with friends, you know what I mean? It's like you're balanced. You're diversifying your stocks, you know, you're not putting everything in this one bucket. So I always feel like that's like really best to do. And it's another way to guard your heart. Because it do seem like when you put everything into this one person, you do have more like stock in it per se. Like, you really want a return on this investment because that's the only thing like you're pouring into. So yes, diversify. Oh, so we talked about Paige and Chris, but I just wanted to know, okay, so how would you coach Paige? Let's say, how would you coach Paige after this situation? You know what I mean? She just came through like something public on TV at that. But how would you coach her to learn? Well, I'm not going to say that she doesn't value herself, but how would you coach her in this situation? She just got out of a situation with a narcissist, and you called him a malignant narcissist. That sounds even more like terrible. So how would you coach Paige if you had the opportunity to do so?
Yes, malignant narcissists are the worst of the worst. And I think that's why Paige's situation is so, I can't even say unique, because malignant narcissists exist everywhere. Chris just gave us an example on national television of what that looked like. But for Paige, the reason why I say that is because what Paige went through is a level of manipulation that most people probably won't ever experience. And that put her in a position where she was made to believe that she was in a safe space that was never going to be safe for her. So much of what I do as a coach is help people understand exactly what you're dealing with in terms of narcissism. There's a clear path that narcissists take um, to sort of trap or capture their victims. I don't like to call us victims. I like to call us survivors. But while you're in the relationship, you can very much feel like a victim. So much of what we do is about education, and then also the other piece of that is creating like a real shift mentally and understanding that this didn't happen to you; it happened for you. So there was much that was exposed within Paige herself that she could have unfortunately only learned in this situation. Um, that just revealed pieces of her that, again, are healthy gifts that need to be put in the right hands and used properly. So understanding that, of course, no one's perfect. I'm not saying that Paige wasn't at fault in the situation, but Paige had a lot of qualities that a healthy relationship needs to exist. And it was so clear. We saw a woman who really, really wanted to fight for a relationship, but reciprocity requires two people. So the ability to pour into a person is something that every healthy relationship needs to survive. If I'm pouring into you and you're pouring into me, neither one of us will ever be empty. Well, in theory, essentially, we'll always have what we need. And of course, communication and things like that come into play. But we saw Paige pour into Chris, and she got nothing back in return. So understanding, like, you're going to keep pouring, but first it's going to be to yourself, so that you're never pouring from a place of lack, but you're always showing up to a relationship whole, healthy, and healed, and operating from a place of abundance. And with letting God lead in that direction, and also being mindful of who we're letting into our lives, operating from that space, like, you're going to attract, again, maybe not even intimate relationships, but the type of friends, the type of jobs, the types of hobbies, the type of just the lifestyle that you want, because you're operating from a place of wholeness, and you're not there's no need to really attach yourself to spaces that aren't healthy for you. So helping Paige in this example understand that she was operating some real gifts. We just have to put those in the right hands and use them as such.
That's good. Can you say that again? Where if we're both pouring into each other, how did that go again? That was good.
So I really do believe that is the hallmark of a healthy relationship. And why we're just called to love one another above ourselves, right? Because, again, there's absolutely nothing wrong with an empath operating from a heart-centered space. We just have to be mindful of how that's used. We're called to love and care about other people's happenings in life. So if you and I if we're in a relationship, whoever you're in a relationship with, if you're pouring into me and I'm pouring into you, we're never going to be empty. The flow is going back and forth. As soon as I pour into you, I know something is coming back to me, and I'm not pouring into you to get something back. It's just because we both want to be here. I don't want your cup to be empty if I love and care about you. And because you love and care about me, you don't ever want me to be empty emotionally. And sometimes that's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to take some tough conversations. Like, it sounds glamorous just talking about it, but in reality, it can be difficult. But again, when you have two people's hearts that are in the right place, no matter how difficult it is, like, the concern is to satisfy each other without losing yourself. And what makes narcissism such an unhealthy dynamic is the narcissist is a bucket with holes in it. So whatever you pour, it's never going to add up to anything.
Wow, that was very, very good. And it just reminded me of, like, this YouTube channel I watch, and it's called Anointed Fire. And I remember she was saying in relationships, it should be two people trying to outdo each other, like in the love department. You know what I mean? Like, just and that just kind of made me think of what you just shared, like, just continuously pouring into each other, and then you guys are both full. It's almost like going into a relationship. I think sometimes we're like selfish minded and not realizing that it's about, kind of not, I don't want to say serving, but being there for another person, like you said, looking out for someone other than yourself. And, like, if two people are on that same page, that's like a powerful dynamic. Like,
and you said it right. It is serving. Like, we've got to get comfortable acknowledging the fact that we are serving each other in a relationship.
You know what? You are so right, because I've been learning about the fruits of the spirit. I'm glad I had this conversation with you, because I have this plate here, and I say, you know what, I'm not eating, so I'm just gonna write down the fruits of the spirit, and that's what I'm gonna eat. And then I was learning like love. Love is a fruit of the spirit, and I learned that that's to consider another's needs greater than one's own. And I never thought of it like that. You think you love your family because you know them and you're growing around them. So, you create a bond, you form a bond, but it's actually like loving, doing for them, like thinking of them before you think of yourself. And I just never considered that. And I really feel like now that we're talking, like, okay, that is kind of what the foundation of a relationship should be. You know what I mean? I'm looking out for your best interest as you're looking out for mine. So
That is beautiful. That's
not being selfless.
exercise to put yourself in.
I had this plate. I was ready to eat. But I'm like, I'm going to eat the fruit of the spirits and quite okay. So a woman meets a man and starts dating the guy she really likes. So what are some things, what are some qualities or characters that this person should like possess? Because you know what I mean? Like, how can we vet someone to make sure that they are not a narcissist? So like what are anti-narcissist characteristics that a person should possess that we can kind of maybe feel safe in? Or I don't want to say safe, but kind of let our guard down a little bit for it.
Yeah. First, it's gonna take time to vet out people in these ways. Like, I had a therapist once who told me, and I think that this is obviously more so a recommendation. He was also a man, I'll say that. He suggested that it takes 9 months to get to see someone's full character, at least like enough time to collect enough data about someone's full character. He suggested 9 months. I think that that's case by case, but first, to answer your question, I think it's about being patient enough to collect enough data in these areas. And then the things that we're looking for if we're trying to avoid a narcissist is, number one, going to be humility. Let me back up.
Oh, that was good.
For women dating men, it's going to be, is he a man of God? And when I say a man of God, that itself can be tricky. That's loaded, because we see people like Derek Jackson who just want to pull the God card. But we know Derek Jackson is a narcissist. And the reason why some narcissists never actually submit to God is because they think that they are God. They want to be God. And so you'll never see, even though a narcissist is intellectual enough to talk about God, and a pastor recently said that to Satan, and all these like sayings are coming up to me. I've heard that if the devil can't get to you, he'll send a narcissist. And a pastor recently said that Satan can quote scripture, but there's no revelation. So he knows the Bible. Satan will tell you what God said, but he has no real revelation working in his heart. And you'll see narcissists who are just Satan's employees, in my opinion, put harshly, but that is what it is. They're intellectual enough to quote scripture, to know the Bible, but there's too much pride in their heart for the word to actually penetrate. So a true man of God, and you're going to see that by the fruit. You're going to see what his spirit is up to, and you're going to let that play out. And then also humility. Are they humble? Are they kind to people that can't do anything for them? Or are they only interested in like stroking egos for someone who makes them look good? Patience. A narcissist typically will rush sex, conversation, finances. Like, these are the types that want to get you entangled into their world as quickly as possible, because the deeper you are into their world, the harder it is for you to leave when they take their mask off, which is inevitable. They can only maintain this like good, perfect, loving character for so long, and then once they have you emotionally hooked, they will remove that mask. So someone who is like healthy enough to set out a healthy pace without rushing you emotionally or physically. Someone who doesn't idolize materials. So there's absolutely nothing wrong with having nice things. Like, God is a God of excellence, and I do believe that there's absolutely nothing wrong with having nice things and owning nice materials, so long as they don't become your idols. But what you'll see with narcissists is that everything they own is their idol. That's what they care about. So someone who values people over possessions would probably be another. Someone who can take accountability. That's another big one. Narcissists cannot handle accountability. They run from every situation where they will be held accountable for what they do and say. In their minds, they can do and say whatever they want, and we just all have to like deal with it. And if you've ever tried to hold a narcissist accountable for something they did or said, like, we saw that in Chris and Paige. Like, we saw that play out where Chris would do and say absurd things, but the experts couldn't get him to sit down and have a full conversation. Just like, there's just something that's blocking their perception of reality. They make this fantasy world where it's all about them. They're operating of excellence in their world, and we're all just like characters that just have to like go along with their story. So someone who can be held accountable, and nobody, like, it's not fun to be told like, hey, you dropped the ball, you could have done this better. But a normal person, a non-narcissist, can own up and say, hey, like, I didn't mean to hurt you in that way. Here's how I'll do better next time. You'll never get that from a narcissist genuinely.
Or like you said, like, even saying that humbles you. A part of like being humble is admitting your wrongs and that you're human. You know what I mean? Like, we're going to make mistakes. So the fact, like you said, that they can't acknowledge that, yeah. And it almost, like, when you said they think they are God, that makes perfect sense. Like, you can't hold anybody accountable if they think that they're right. You know what I mean? They can't do no wrong. You're the wrong one, if anything. So it's just like, dang, that was a very deep. I never thought of it like that. Say it again.
I'm sorry. It's a deep topic that, like, it just has so many different like layers to it. We could talk all day about narcissism itself.
I never considered it like that. And Lights on Empowerment said narcissist equals Satan's employees. I love it. I love when you said that too. That was good. Ooh. That was very, very deep.
And I believe that, like, just like God works through people, like the enemy can and does as well. So
yes. But it's like, I like what you said too. As a survivor, it was for you. You know what I mean? It worked for you. And I was just listening to Joel Osteen. He was talking about being strategically ordered. And he was saying, like, yeah, some things hurt. God probably didn't send it, but he allowed it. So you know what I mean? If he allowed it, then you can overcome it. You were like meant to conquer it or have victory over it in this area. And I feel like if you survive a narcissist, you are like really strong. You're definitely God's child, because you can literally lose your mind. And that's probably what the enemy wants you to do. You know what I mean? So you can't function. So how important is it? And like I said, a lot of stuff I got from your social media, your content, like, I was just like on it. So in your opinion, how important is it to wait on God's timing instead of our own when it comes to dating in a relationship? And also, how can we tell the difference between God's timing and our timing? We may want to be in a relationship. We may think it's the right time, but how do we know, like, if it's our time or if it's God's time?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think I know that waiting on God's timing is crucial, not just in dating, but in every area of life. So there are two questions that I encourage all believers to ask themselves. And one is, do I really want to know God's will for my life? Mm-hmm. And two, am I willing to be obedient enough when I know it? Whew. So for most of us, we want to know God's will, but once it's revealed, it's like, no, I'm gonna keep doing what I was doing. I'll go about it in my own time. Let me take the wheel back. And so we've got to get honest with ourselves in that area. If you really want to know God's will, are you going to be obedient enough if he says wait? Or are you going to be obedient enough if he says not this type of person or just not this time? Because God knows what's best for us. And the reality is we just don't. Sometimes our wants don't match up with his timeline.
Mm-hmm.
One of the ways that I think
Good.
one of the ways I think is sort of how we can tell whether or not we're operating out of our own will or aligning ourselves with God's will is the process. So not everything will be like perfect and glamorous, but what God sends will come with clarity. And what we create on our own will come with confusion and chaos.
Mm.
That is not to say that everything that God sends will be clean and perfect and packaged with a pretty bow just how we want it. But when you're spending time to get to know God and being prayerful and mindful about every decision that we make, like the Holy Spirit will reassure you about what is truly, truly for you. And we've got to get really, really honest about how we're seeking that and if we're seeking that at all. Oftentimes, and I'm guilty of this, of course, as well. Oftentimes when we want something, we'd rather go figure it out the hard way ourselves and then ask God for forgiveness for walking out of obedience. But I think that there's an opportunity for us to get curious before we get ourselves into some trouble or some pain, to just get curious about what God is asking us to do in this moment. And, he cares about our dating life. He doesn't want us to hurt or to suffer, but perhaps like there's something that he's building in us that has to just wait for a different season. So I think one of the most important things is like using our single seasons to build that relationship with him. So again, we're not showing up to a relationship operating out of lack or insecurity or insufficiency, but we know who we are and whose we are because God already told us and God is already building that. That's a work in progress that will be lifelong. But when we use our single season as we should, it sets us up for a healthy relationship when God is actually ready to give it to us. And what God sends, I want what God wants for me, not what I think I can create by my own might, by my own doing. I'll create a dumpster fire. So I personally would rather wait for God, even if it is uncomfortable during that season.
That's good. Wait on the Lord, guys. I agree. Because, I think about how God sits up here and we're down here. So he can see down there, but you can't. You know what I mean? We can only see like right here, what's in front of us. So it is really like trusting on him. If I say that I'm a child of God, then I have to believe in him in every aspect, even when I don't, like you say, even when it feels uncomfortable, even when you don't want to, even when you feel like it's your time, like, it's my season, or I'm ready. I graduate. I used to think like that. Graduated college. This is my time now, Lord. But no. And I'm like grateful now because now I'm satisfied in a way that I know that a relationship couldn't. Like even when I do get married, now I know that I can be content in God. Like, and it's probably where God wanted to bring me to anyway. You know what I mean? To know that I know that he is the one that's sustaining me. Not nothing external, but it's him. So I'm grateful for this single season too.
Yes.
Wasn't always like this, but
yes.
So I want to again switch gears a little bit. I really feel like I liked your content because it also like touches on hard topics, the narcissist and things like that, but also like family dynamics and our childhood and upbringing. So I just wanted to talk to you about daddies and daughters because I feel like you made a post about that and the fatherless wound. So I was just curious, what are the wrong types of men, women that have a father that didn't have a father? Oh, no, I'm saying it wrong. What are the wrong types of men, women that have a father wound attract? Because you did talk about the father wound. That's what it was. Can you tell us what a father wound is and the types of men that you attract when you have a father wound?
Yeah. So we are familiar with like what the world calls daddy issues. But I think that there's an opportunity to obviously to unpack that a little bit deeper. So whether you had a father figure in your life or not, there's an opportunity to develop. There's a chance that a father wound could have been developed. So really all that is recognizing that our primary caretakers, our parents, whoever took care of you from birth, are our first examples of a relationship, what it means to exist in a relationship with someone. And for women in particular, if the first relationship that we had with a man was flawed, and we don't spend time to repair that or even recognize what's going on, much of our lives will be spent subconsciously trying to attract relationships to fix what was flawed at childhood. So again, whether your father was in your household in your life or not, there's a chance that a father wound developed if we're not taking care of or tending to that wound. So we subconsciously try to fix what was broken in our childhood, and that opens us up to attract toxic energy because we didn't have a solid example of what a healthy relationship with a man should have been, should have looked like. And that looks very different for many type of people. But yeah, what we were exposed to is usually what we recreate, whether that was healthy or not.
That is good. I never considered it. And I like that you said whether you had a father or not. Because sometimes you see people that grow up with their dad, like, oh, they're good, they got it. But it still could have been areas where their dad may have maybe possibly dropped the ball. You know what I mean? It still created a father wound. So I'm glad that you touched on that. So for the women that may have a father wound, how can they parent themselves back to wholeness?
Yeah. In a practical way, this is something that was helpful for me throughout my healing journey as well. I had a coach sit me down, and she had me close my eyes and think back to the moment where life changed for me in terms of my relationship with my father. For me, I happened to be 13, and that's when my parents officially divorced and my dad left. And I'll never forget that morning. And my parents' marriage was rocky throughout their whole marriage and my whole life. But that morning is when my understanding of what relationship and marriage and love was. And I didn't have the language to explain this at the time, but there was infidelity and just a lot of toxicity in their marriage. And seeing my dad, seeing that out between my mother and my father, who were two people that were supposed to love each other, my only reference for what love was, made me hate myself. Because it's okay, well, if my two creators can disrespect each other and I came from them, I don't even know what I deserve. I don't know what respect is. It just, seeing my father do that to my mother and him being the first man and the example of what a man should be. It's well, if you didn't love my mother properly, how could you possibly love me? I came from y'all. So, as a 13-year-old, I didn't have that language, but that was really the start of what turned into creating it just turned into toxicity. I bundled that up and turned it into toxicity because I just didn't know how to process it. And of course, nobody was helping me process. I didn't even know anything was wrong. So, in a very real way, I think going back and just having a conversation with yourself, if you can capture that moment and just telling yourself what you needed to hear at that age. And it's a process of recognizing those wounds will still show up and still sneak up, perhaps no matter how much healing you do, no matter how much self-work you do, but a process of walking yourself back to the truth each time those moments pop up. And each time you can walk yourself back to the truth, we become more and more mindful of what that looks like and what that feels like. So those thoughts might come, but they'll leave a lot quicker than before we would have entertained them. We would have let those thoughts stay and we would have acted on them. But now we can recognize hey, that's just my childhood popping up again. And that thought isn't true. Now as an adult, I know that this is true about me. We can feed ourselves what we need to know now. And I think much of that just requires us to be mindful about when things went left in our own personal histories.
Wow. Brittany, I really love your transparency in that moment and the story you shared and the tips actually, because as you were talking, I was processing it for my own self because like you, I when I was in Atlanta in grad school, I was a part of like this women's therapy group or whatever, and we was talking about families, and somehow, we're talking about your relationship with your father and your mother, and the facilitator was like, yes, because if you grew up without hearing like from your dad that you're special, that I'm so proud of you, you're the apple of my eye. I don't know why hearing her say that just triggered me, and I just could not stop crying because I didn't realize, like, oh, that is what I was missing. Because I try to pride myself on being like, um, you hear the statistics about women that grow up without their fathers are more likely to do this. So I made sure I was the opposite because I'm like, oh no, that's not going to be my story. But not realizing like it's also an emotional thing, like that fathers fulfill. And it's kind of like you said, like you had to go back and put what you didn't get, now. And that's probably why I like affirmations and a bunch of words because I just didn't grow up hearing that. So now it's like, I didn't realize like subconsciously that's probably why I do that, but it's just like, dang, wow. So that's why I'm just glad that you brought that up. So I just wanted to put that in there.
But thank you for your transparency as well. And I think just like being able to like show up for those feelings and for that reality is like what puts you in the direction of true healing, true transformation. So many times like that's a really deep space to be in with yourself, and it's not somewhere you want to be. Like those aren't fun thoughts to think. So I think just showing up for yourself in that way is what positions you to heal. And again, as a coach, help other women heal in that way as well. Other people.
We're in this together. So Brittany, we hit the hour. I have like one more question and then we can like wrap it up because I don't want to take all your time, girl. But I really like the fact that you put yourself out there as a faith-based counselor. You know what I mean? So like people don't get it twisted. Like, this is what I'm talking about. This is where I'm coming from. So how did you why did you decide to like, I guess, specialize and put yourself as a faith-based coach? And also, this is a question I learned that I should, that time where we're collecting data for dating a person. Because like you said, people can say that, yeah, I believe in God, but how did you come to know the Lord Jesus Christ? You know what I mean? How did you know God for yourself? Like, so that's like the question I'm going to start asking. So I have so that was a 2 for you. So, why did you decide to actually specialize in being a faith-based coach? And also, like, how did you come to know the Lord for yourself? And how has that impacted you in your life coaching?
Okay. I'm gonna try to answer this the best I can because it's a loaded question.
Really? Okay.
Okay, so again, in my household, I was exposed to a lot growing up. And my mom took us to church every single Sunday. We're a Christian. She took my siblings and I to church every Sunday. And if friends spent the night at my house on Saturday, we were awesome. Like they were coming to church with us. My father, on the other hand, just wanted nothing to do with God. So I remember I really like enjoyed church for like the social aspects of it. Like my cousin went there and like, we had friends and all that stuff. But the church itself didn't really feed us spiritually. So there wasn't much to take away in terms of like a relationship with God. I didn't know what that meant at all. And then I would, we'd go to church and we'd get these feel-good messages about what the love of Jesus Christ is supposed to be doing in ourselves, in our families, in our communities. But then I would go home and it's like, okay, I'm seeing the exact opposite of that, at least a few nights a week. So it really positioned me to just like question who God was and be very like flexible in terms of like showing up for that relationship. It was just something that we did again. So when I got to college, fast forward to college, I wound up in a major called intersexuality and women's studies. And it destroyed everything that I was raised to believe about God in the worst way. At the time, I didn't see it as a bad thing. I saw it as like, oh, like this is a different way to look at things. And I was being naturally a curious person who's observant about life. Like I like having different perspectives and different understandings of the world. But what it did is it removed God from the role that he had been playing in my life and put him in a totally different position. So my major, gender, sexuality, and women's studies, really made God an oppressor, and made religion itself sort of like an institution that was problematic. And it can be, for sure, because humans ruin everything. That's why our faith has to be in God, and not always, not the people who carry out and distribute the word, but our faith first and foremost is in God. But fast forward to after college, like that period of learning really just like opened me up to being curious about more, like what was out there. And I got really into self-help, which the enemy is at work right now to make everything seem innocent enough to just try and just dabble with, and things look just enough like God that we can entertain them without it being a problem, without us cheating on God, so to speak. And so again, because like God, I had taken him out of the role that he had been playing in my life, I really made space in my life for a lot of things that look like God but were not. And so I got really into like law of attraction and crystals and horoscopes and what I now know to be called like occult practices. And really all that means is like us attributing like special powers, supernatural powers to things that are not God. Crystals aren't going to save me. They're not going to save you. My horoscope can't give me guidance. And if it's not coming from the word of God, we've got to assume it's coming from the enemy. And then like tarot card readings and things like that. And I didn't think anything was wrong. Like my logic was like, like supernatural energy does exist, and God, if God's working through people in that way, if God can work through a tarot card reader, like what's wrong with me entertaining these things? And there was just like a chunk of time in my life where I was doing everything I possibly could to manifest and attract and build the life that I wanted. And I can feel and see like so clearly that God like humbled me real quick. Like he took, like life just came to like a halt. Everything that I had, everything that I knew, everything that I had become, I literally just lost. Like I found myself in a very, very dark place, and it left me questioning like, well, I was using my crystals. Like I thought I was following like, like what the pattern said this month, what CoStar said this month, what my horoscope said this month. Like, I'm manifesting, like I'm recharging my crystals on every full moon. Like, why does my life look like this? And that is the moment that Jesus Christ snatched me up. And really like, it was a period of me having to, again, let go of everything that I had, everything that I thought that I knew, and understand that the God that I thought I had been getting to know was not Jesus Christ. And if it wasn't Jesus, again, it was the enemy. So really that was like the foundation that all that happened probably about 6 months into me launching my coaching practice. And I started to realize like, wow, like if God isn't at the center of the very real life decisions that we're making, then it's no different than like us trying to do everything by our own might, by our own power. And so getting back into the word of God and recognizing that this isn't just a book of like complicated stories that are old and don't mean anything. Like this is the only truth, and it's practical, and it's something that my heart needs to be invested into every day. And that's the only way that life is going to make sense. That's the only way that I'm going to live well. And that's something that I couldn't know for myself and not take it into my business. Like there's no way. And I made a deal with God. Right now I'm pursuing my Christian counselor certificate so that I can operate in that space fully. But I made a deal with God that I don't want to keep touching lives if I'm not keep putting you at the center of what we think, feel, and do. Because that's the only way it's going to make sense. Otherwise, what are we even doing?
Mhm.
Literally, what are we doing? If God, the creator of the universe, who knows every hair on our head, who has our plans in his heart written down, like, who knows where we're going, like, what does any of this even make sense if he's not at the center? So healing to me doesn't make sense without putting God there. Like, becoming the best versions of ourselves, there is no such thing if God isn't creating that. So yeah, it just came from like a really like dark period where I had no other choice but to pick up my Bible and like get really, really real with myself about who God was, and just invite him into that space, and let him into my heart again. And it's like, I'm never going back. Like, like, he's got my whole heart.
Oh my gosh, I love that. And then Lights On Empowerment said the same thing. She said, "Wow, love your transparency." And I love it too, because it almost makes your testimony that much more powerful to me, to know that you tried these things and now you're just like, okay, no, like that's not what it is. It's almost like, I don't know, we can relate to you more. Because I think sometimes people think that you have to be perfect, or that like you have to live like a perfect life to be able to talk to people or touch the lives of people. But like to hear you say like, okay, I went down this path, but I realized like, wait, Jesus was the only way after all. You know what I mean? I'm just like kind of grateful to hear this, because it's like his goodness and mercy is still like, even when we be doing our own thing, not recognizing him, I just feel like he'd be like, it's okay. She's going to come back. Like, she's mine. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it was just like very, very powerful that you shared your testimony. And I'm glad to like, have you on my platform. And guys, you hear this, like she has God at the center of her life. So it's more so like, working with her, you're going to get that too. And you see, that's her name. Life coach, life coach Britt. It's up there. So look her up and at her, talk to her, work with her. Like, you will be in good hands. Like, she surrendered to the master. So that makes it like all good. So I love that story. I feel like it's something else that you touched on too that made me think. I think like you said, how you made a pact to God. That reminded me of my pact too, because I don't know about, oh no. I heard that Atlanta never closed down, but up here, up north, like churches and stuff was closed, and they just kind of opened up here like a few months ago, and I've been going ever since. And I'm like, you know what, Cinquetta, I can still watch this online. But I'm like, no, do you remember when you didn't have a car? You said that as long as you have a car, you're going to go to the house of the Lord. So don't like forget that. So
Yeah.
here that you have made a pact, like those pacts really be meaning something.
Yes, and that speaks to like us being in relationship with God. Like, it's no more like, it seems like this big scary thing because it's invisible and it's God, but it's a personal, intimate relationship. And when we're talking about like sharing that with God and letting him know, like, God, this is how I want to serve you. This is how I want to further our relationship. He values that. So the closer we get to God, and the closer we draw to him, the closer he will draw to us. And that's when it's like, okay, like, here's what you're asking me to do, and I'm gonna do it. When I get the car, I'm gonna go. So that's beautiful to hear as well. And thank you for sharing that.
Oh, thank you, Brittany, again. So that was all my questions. If you have any final thoughts, you can let us know. Anything you would like to add. And also, please let us know how we can find you. Any upcoming projects you're working on, anything we need to be on the lookout for. Like, this is your time to tell us.
Thank you. You can find me on Instagram at Life Coach Brit, and also I write, so you can find me on Medium /words by Brit.
Oh, you're on Medium? Oh, wow. I want to like write for them. Oh my gosh.
You
You now.
I'm gonna hold you to that. You're going to write for Medium. You're going to write
Oh
for Medium.
my gosh. I was just say it again.
It's self-publishing. You just have to create it.
Okay, I want to do that. I was just on Medium today because I get, like the emails, and it was a really good article about like how reading rewires your brain for good. And I wanted to read it more because I'm like, okay, if the world can say that for that, imagine what it's doing when you read the Bible. So that's why like the articles like sparked my interest. You know, I was going to tie that thing back up to God too. No, but yes, that's funny how like look at this, everything is just coming together. But go ahead, Brittany. So you're on Medium, and where else can we find you? And oh yeah, what else are you working on?
Yeah, so again, Instagram Life Coach Brit. YouTube is something that I'm really interested in growing and showing up for more consistently. So look out for that. The channel is up. The channel is created. I believe I have one video, and also Life Coach Brit. And then a few writing projects in the works that I'll keep everybody updated on. But I think where I'm at in my process is, again, letting God guide me. Like I get into the habit of like wanting to create and produce. And I've had to sort of realize like, it's not my time. So there will be moments where it's like, nothing's coming to me, God. Like I'm not getting, like, I don't have a spark. I don't know what you want me to say, what you want me to talk about, what you want me to do. And then I'll step away from the work for a little bit. And turns out the material that I needed, I just hadn't lived enough yet. Like I had to get there. I had to keep doing a little bit. And God had a few more steps that he wanted me to actually live out myself before I could show up for it in content in any kind of way. So I'm writing, but I don't know exactly when I'll be able to share it with the world because God and I are working on it together. But also on my Instagram, there's a link in my bio if anyone's interested in one-on-one sessions, and that's where you can book me.
Awesome. Amazing. Brittany, you are so dope. I'm so happy that you decided to come on my platform. We were able to like listen to you, get very good advice, gems, and also hopefully strengthen our relationship with God. You know, this podcast is called Sis, it's just not God's best for you. So reminding and remembering like what this is all about is about God and receiving his best, you know? And I'm gonna wrap it up with your words. As we know whose we are and who we are. That makes the difference, guys. So thank you again for joining me. And thank you again, everyone on Instagram for chiming in. Shouts out to you, Lights on Empowerment Girl. I need to have you up here next. But thank you again, everyone, for joining and listening in. And you guys have a wonderful night and evening. Bye.